Right, we're about 4 minutes past the hour, so I think we'll get started, folks. Good morning. I'm Krista Ross, CEO at the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome everybody to the fourth installment in our political leadership series leading up to the provincial election, which is on Monday. In this session, we're going to hear from MacKenzie Thomason, leader of the NDP party. And I want to remind you that this series is being hosted by the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton, Ignite Fredericton, Economic Development Greater St. John, and 3+ in Moncton. We'd also like to say a thank you to the Atlantic Chamber for their support in this event. In the chat box, you're going to see a link to a couple of letters that have been sent recently to all party leaders on behalf of the business community, one from the Atlantic Chamber and one from a larger group of 10 organizations who wanted to share their issues and concerns coming into the election. So before we get started today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. To begin, we're going to have an opening comment, 10 to 20 minutes from MacKenzie Thomason, and that's going to be followed by a Q&A. The audience, everybody who's participating today is muted, so we ask that you put your questions in the chat box to submit. And today, David Duplessis, CEO of the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce, will be our moderator for the questions. And he will go through as many questions as possible. And he's going to be prioritizing them with business-focused questions today. And some questions may get combined so that we can keep on track with time. Just a reminder that the session is being recorded, and we will be posting the session once it's complete. And so we invite you to follow us, all of us, on our media feeds, social media feeds. And with that, I'm pleased to hand the floor over to MacKenzie Thomason, leader of the NDP party.
Thank you very much for having me. I apologize, my audio cut out there while you were talking just for a couple of seconds, so I didn't catch all of what you said. I apologize. But you were talking about the letters that were sent, and then I didn't hear anything until MacKenzie Thomason.
Well, just as a reminder, I wanted to make sure people knew that they're going to put their questions in the chat. Their mics are muted. The floor will be yours. And then David Duplessis, CEO of the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce, is going to moderate the Q&A with you. So with that, I'll give you the floor.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. So my name is MacKenzie. I am the leader of the NDP. I want to thank you all very much for having me. It's always great to get invited for things like this. It's a great opportunity for me as a party leader to learn and to express the position of the New Democrats, especially when it pertains to our local business community. Sorry. So I'm excited to be able to take your questions today. It's like I say, it's a learning opportunity for me, as well as a chance to let everybody know what the NDP believes as far as supporting our local communities through economic growth, through business development. And yeah, I really like to get into that as much as possible. And like I say, getting to be invited to these things, these formats is great. So yeah, I don't know how long you wanted me to talk at the beginning, but
I'm going to jump back in for a moment. What we did, MacKenzie, was that we invited all of the leaders to do a 10 to 20 minute presentation or conversation about their platform and what their party is intending for the region. And so if you'd like to start with that, that would be great. And then we'll move into Q&A with David.
Okay. Perfect. Sorry, I didn't see the format beforehand. We're all a little bit whirlwind over at the office. So thank you very much for being patient with me. So I guess, like I say, the NDP is very happy to attend these events to make sure that everybody understands that the NDP is here for them. for the business community, the local business community, for the people of New Brunswick. Our small and medium-sized businesses are the ones that create jobs in this province. They are the ones that stimulate the economy the quickest, that stimulate the economy the most, and especially coming out of COVID-19 pandemic times, we are going to need a very strong, very robust small business community to help reignite a lot of the job losses that have been a prevalent issue during COVID. I work for what I would call a small business. I mean, it's a Hampton Inn and Suites, but it is locally owned and operated, along with 2 other hotels. So I do work for a small business, and it's always great to be able to say that, because like I say, they are the ones that are helping our communities. They're the ones that support our sports teams, our little leagues, our hockey teams, and they're really the ones that are getting involved with our community. So it's always great when parties and when political leaders sit down and have these kinds of conversations. I think that the New Democrats have the best plan as far as moving forward from COVID, and that's a big focus this election because of how we are, because of how our society is right now. Unfortunately, it is pandemic ridden, and during a pandemic is the best time to have an election. I don't think so, but we are very happy to be able to give New Brunswickers the option to have a more equitable and a more fair economic recovery from the pandemic. So it's always important to analyze as a whole, as a holistic approach, how to get out of situations. So it's great when we look at environmental protections, when we look at economic recovery. It's always in the NDP's platform to not just look at the singular issue, but to see how things are interconnected, to see how things work with that particular issue. So I always use the easiest one for me to use is environmental protection. And when you talk about environmental protection, you also have to look at how we are going to get people in the economy to be able to do the jobs we need to move to a green economy. So in my mind, because a lot of those are going to be degree requiring jobs or some kind of formal training, it makes sense to me to have reduced costs for public universities and no cost for tuition down the road for public institutions, for those people who want to go get that education. And when you look at economic recovery, you can't just look at one singular business or one singular community. You have to look at, well, how can we stimulate the economy? So how can we work with small business? How can we work with people to advance the economy forward? And again, when you're talking about economic recovery, you talk about a Green New Deal, you talk about a green energy revolution, a green energy transition, and you talk about our tourism sector, because that's a very large sector, and in COVID, they have been hurting. Like I say, I work in hospitality, so it is something that that I am in the thick of, and it's things like that that I think sets the NDP apart, is that we are able to look at things as a whole. We don't look at just one issue. We look at that issue and see how it interconnects with the broader community and how it interconnects with other issues. So I think that's pretty much my 10 minutes. I really want to get to your questions, so I don't want to take up too much of your time this morning. But yeah, the New Democrats are very excited to be here. We're very excited to be able to give you our plan for local communities and local economic growth. And I will be very happy to start taking your questions.
Well, thank you so much, MacKenzie. This is David Duplessis with the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. I, too, would like to echo my welcome to you for coming to chat with us today. And thank you, everyone, for attending as well. As Krista had indicated, we're going to try to combine some of the questions if some of them overlap. As well, we'll try to put some of the more business-focused ones first. So I have a question from Jamie Ryan, and Jamie is the CEO of the New Brunswick Real Estate Association, a very big supporter of us at the Chamber. So thank you, Jamie. His question is, as an association, we are seeking an answer from each of the parties in the following. Please, how will your party address deficiencies in the unfair aspects of the current property tax regime and local government structure in the province?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question. You cut out.
How will your party address deficiencies and the other unfair aspects of the current property tax regime and local government structure in our province?
I'm sorry, I still can't hear you.
David, your mic seems to be cutting in and out.
Let's see.
There, it's good.
Okay, how about this one here? How will your party address deficiencies in the unfair aspects of the current property tax regime and local government structure in our province?
Yes, so I think that speaks greatly to municipal reform. I think it's, our municipalities, I talked about this with the Fredericton City Council yesterday. We need a new relationship with our municipalities. We need a new relationship between the province and all of our cities. And I think having a review of how much money is split, how much money goes where, and how people who are paying what sorts of property tax is definitely something the NDP supports. Making sure that things are fair and equitable is something in our platform, and we take that approach not only with individuals but with all of society in mind. So it's about reviewing what we currently have and working with our stakeholders in that area to make sure that we have the best plan for New Brunswick and for all the people living in our province.
Thank you. The next question comes from John Wishart, the CEO in our Moncton Chamber of Commerce. Hi, John. How would the NDP stimulate the private sector to lead growth? What distinguishes your party's approach to COVID recovery from what the other parties have outlined?
Yeah, so I think what sets the NDP apart is that we look at everything as an interconnected web. Nothing is singular, nothing is simply one issue. Everything is interconnected somehow to something else. So when we look at economic recovery, when we look at COVID recovery, we really need to focus on stimulating the economy from the bottom up. That works by getting more money in the hands of everyday working New Brunswickers. It also is achieved by making sure that our small and local businesses are able to compete, are able to hire more employees. And I think when we talk about transitioning to a green economy, we really need to make sure that the people who are creating those services, creating those products are local to New Brunswick. That way it is making sure that money is staying in New Brunswick. The people who are buying it, the people who are creating it, and the people who are manufacturing it are all in New Brunswick, are all able to contribute to our economy, to our local economy, and to our provincial economy.
Thank you. The next question comes from Krista. What opportunities do you see to cooperate collaboratively with the other Atlantic provinces? And can we better use our collective resources amongst the 4 provinces? And there's a couple of parts to this question, so I'll let you answer the first part first.
Yeah, so I think the Atlantic bubble has proven to be an amazing tool during COVID. And I think it's a precursor to what can be done when all 4 Atlantic provinces work together. We have very similar issues as far as population growth and as far as economic stimulus. And I think that when we are going forward, we really need to be looking at those kinds of relationships. I said I work in hospitality, and I can tell you that when the Atlantic bubble opened, we went from being about 2 or 3% occupancy to being at 50% occupancy pretty much all the time. So when we talk about economic recovery, it's definitely something that has to happen to look at how we can work with our closest neighbors, with Nova Scotia, with PEI, with Newfoundland. We have a shared culture, we have a shared identity, and we have a shared sense of the small town vibe, no matter where you are. And I think that it's something that as Maritimers, we can really get behind and really say, okay, how do we help not only our own province, but how do we work together to make sure that we're, a high tide raises all boats kind of mentality.
How will you support the recovery and future growth of the arts?
I'm
Cutting out again, David.
Cutting out. No, we can't hear you, David.
Better?
Yes.
How will you support the recovery and future growth of the arts sector?
Yeah, so this is something that that I talked about with Fredericton City Council last night as well, and it's something that's very close to my heart. I was a theater kid growing up. I was a theater geek, and I was in choir. I was in band. The theater was basically where I lived, and it saddens me to see the conditions of our local performing arts center. The Playhouse is on its last legs. And I think when you talk about economic recovery, especially once we get out of this physical distance COVID era, people are going to be able to congregate again, and New Brunswickers need to be able to feel a sense of community. My generation statistically is the generation that is leaving the province. Unfortunately, it seems in droves. And I think part of that is because there are people who don't feel that sense of community. They don't feel attached to the community. They don't see economic opportunity. And I think that when we prioritize community-based congregation, when we prioritize community living, making sure that, you know, theater kids have a place that they can practice their craft, that sports students and sports youth have an ability to go out and enjoy themselves in their community while having economic opportunities through increased participation in the community. I think that is incredibly important, and like I say, I'm glad it was brought up because it's something that's close to my heart. And you know, I was talking to a woman from the Playhouse, the rejuvenation group that got together. She was on that board, and she said she graduated from Leo Hayes, and Leo Hayes doesn't even have a theater. So when we talk about places like the Playhouse and a new performing arts center, we really have to understand that it's not only helping the community at large, but it's also helping high school students. And those are the people we really need to be focusing on attracting to stay in New Brunswick, because they're already here, and making sure that they are at the forefront, and young people in general at the forefront of making sure that we have a good economic recovery.
What is the NDP position on the potential for small modular nuclear reactors in our province?
I only caught part of that. The last part kind of fell off.
What's the NDP position on the potential for small nuclear or small modular nuclear reactors in the province?
Yeah, so with small modular nuclear reactors, and I'm glad you have the word nuclear, because I think there's a lot of parties out there who are trying to distance themselves from that nuclear aspect. As far as emissions, they are a clean alternative, but you do have to find somewhere to store the radioactive waste from the nuclear reaction that happens. And it's not only something that I think is still in its developmental stages. It's not a practical right now solution. We have practical right now solutions that exist. So when you talk about solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, New Brunswick is very abundant in all three of those. So and something else I really want to touch on is that in this province, we tend to have a bad habit of allowing monopolization of aspects of the economy. And in the NDP's view, monopolization is a bad thing. It leads to higher fixed prices, and it leads to less consumer choice. So when we talk about power generation, we have to talk about that aspect as well. So it's very hard to monopolize the sun. It's very hard to monopolize the wind. It's very hard to monopolize the sea. But it's quite simple to be able to monopolize 5 or 6 small modular nuclear reactors by one company or another, or by one power generating family or another. So when we talk about small modular nuclear reactors, they're not as clean as they purport to be, and they're not economically viable today. We have technologies that are economically viable today, and we have technologies that are much harder to monopolize on. in wind, solar, and tidal power. And those are what I like to prioritize when we talk about cleaner energy. Nuclear power and small modular nuclear reactors is not something that the NDP is prepared to endorse at this time.
Thank you. Infrastructure spending is an investment in the vitality of the social and economic fabric. For every dollar invested in infrastructure, GDP rises $1.43, and for every $1 million spent, 9.4 jobs are created. Will the NDP prioritize infrastructure investments?
Absolutely, yes. So infrastructure is one of the most important topics to New Brunswickers when I talk to them at the doors, when I talk to them on the streets. You know, they're talking about how their sidewalks are crumbling, the bridges are crumbling, the roads are not drivable. And it's like you said, it creates economic growth. When you invest in people working in infrastructure jobs, when you invest in making your infrastructure more accessible, and when you invest in making your infrastructure more usable, it is always an economic benefit. So it's great that the NDP actually has in their platform that infrastructure is important. We need our roads repaved, we need our bridges rebuilt, and we need to be able to work and drive to work, confident in the fact that we're not going to have to replace car parts every 5 or 6 months. So when you have these terrible roads that we have in most, especially in our rural areas of the province, which is most of the province, people's cars are getting beat to pieces because they are driving on roads that aren't great. And when we talk about infrastructure too, it's not just our physical infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our sidewalks, but it's also our telecommunication systems, making sure that everyone in the province has access to quality high-speed internet. It's our transit system, making sure that those who can't afford vehicles or those who don't want to use a personal vehicle have access to quality public transit in every municipality and across the province of New Brunswick. And making sure that when we talk about infrastructure, we don't forget that everyone needs these services, not just roads, not just bridges, not just sidewalks and the like of that, but making sure that people have access, especially in COVID, to what I would call invisible infrastructure for most people. You know, making sure the power gets to houses, making sure the internet gets to houses. All of it needs an update, where I think we're working on 1980s, 1990s systems, and we definitely need them updated. I know there's some places in rural New Brunswick where people still don't have access to high-speed internet. So it's a real limit, especially in a time of COVID when everybody's going back to school and trying to work remotely.
The next question is from Morgan. Could you expand upon the public investment that appears in the platform document? How does it work, and what priorities would be the focus? That's on the Public Investment Bank.
Public Investment Bank, how does the Public Investment Bank work in our platform?
Yes.
So when we talk about economic stimulus and when we talk about growing the economy and bringing the economy back from COVID, it's very important to understand that when economies grow, they grow from the bottom up. So we're talking about bakeries on the corner and convenience stores in rural communities. Those are the people and those are the businesses that are really creating jobs at a fast rate. Those are the businesses that are creating economic growth. And what the NDP would like to see is that there are systems set up, that there is money made available for people to start businesses, for people to invest in businesses that are creating these kinds of jobs. So when we talk about growing the economy, we really need to focus on making sure that there are, local brew houses set up, making sure that there are local cafes, making sure that there are local investment in their own community, because we find when large corporations come in, Walmart, Target, you name it, it doesn't create the same kind of lasting growth. It's kind of a flashbang effect. So there's a bunch of people hired and that's great, but then it doesn't, it's not really a growth, it's more of a boom and then a plateau. So when we talk about economic growth, we really need to be talking about what does this upward spiral to make sure that people are being hired and people are being well employed. And that comes from making sure that people are able to make confident investments in new businesses and existing businesses.
One further question on the investment bank. Would that not further enhance the whole notion of corporate welfare and would turn the province into a bank of last resort?
You know, like I say, it's about focusing on our small businesses. So I have no interest in giving money to large corporations. I have no interest in giving money to multinationals. If they want to continue earning their profits, that's something that they need to focus on. It's something that they need to work on with their board and with their shareholders. But when we talk about, you know, the mom and pop bakery shop and the mom and pop tailors who are just, you know, they're doing their best to get by, they're doing their best to make sure their employees are well taken care of, those are the people that I want to invest in. I have no desire to give money to large corporations. I have no desire to give tax breaks to rich citizens. It is about making sure that the people at the bottom of that pyramid, at the base of that pyramid, who are making these investments in our community, who are making these strides with our economy, who are stimulating economic growth, making sure that they have the funds, making sure that people have the funds available to invest in those kinds of corporations.
Thank you. The next question is from the New Brunswick Medical Society. In a recent survey conducted by New Brunswick Medical Society, 89% of New Brunswick respondents indicated that healthcare should be the #1 priority in this election. What is your plan to improve healthcare in this province?
So the left, what I would call the left-wing parties, tend to get a lot of criticism because what we have to do is we have to sit down and say, okay, healthcare is chronically underfunded, healthcare is chronically understaffed, and that's something we have to fix. So what we have to do is we have to go in and we have to top up those healthcare monies that are going to our healthcare sector, and it tends to take a lot of money because they've been underfunded for not a year, not a month, not a day, but decades. So when we talk about fixing the healthcare system, we really have to talk about access. It's one thing to say, okay, it's one thing to say that there is a sorry, I can't remember the word I'm looking for there. It's one thing to say that there is a hospital available, that there is a clinic available. It's another thing for somebody to have to drive, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes, and 2 hours just to get access to healthcare. So one aspect I look at is Clinic 554. It is a family doctor first. It provides LGBTQ plus healthcare, and it provides access for reproductive health. And when we talk about healthcare access and when we talk about making healthcare better, we need to find a way to get those 30,000 New Brunswickers without a family doctor off of that wait list. And we also need to make sure that women, LGBTQ plus persons have access to a full wide range of healthcare, not only generalized healthcare, but specific healthcare for them. So the NDP not only wants to make sure we have more doctors in this province by increasing the number of seats, and I was talking to the New Brunswick Medical Society, and they actually suggested that we increase the number of specializations that we can do in this province to encourage doctors to stay here. When doctors go out of province, you know, you get married, you have friends, you start a life, you buy a house, and you don't necessarily want to come, you don't want to have to uproot that to come back to New Brunswick. When we convince doctors to stay in the province when they're already here, they build that home here, they start that family here, they start that life here, and they don't want to uproot that to move to another province. So when we are talking about making sure that the healthcare system is properly funded and properly staffed, those are aspects we have to look at. Making Clinic 554 a model for reproductive and LGBTQ plus health across the province, as well as making them family doctors. They are family doctor centers as well. So making sure that those 30,000 people are getting off of that wait list, making sure we have more doctors through increased specialization abilities here in the province, and making sure that we have not only more seats, but that we make those seats accessible. So again, this is a holistic approach. So when we say we need more nurses, we have to analyze why aren't we getting more nurses? Part of the reason is we don't have enough seats. Part of the reason is we need nurses to stay in the province. And part of the reason is there are people who want to be nurses who can't afford to go to school. So that's why the NDP has a universal post-secondary education plan to make sure that students who want to be nurses are able to go into the nursing field, and to make sure that once they graduate, there are opportunities for them to stay in the province, to work in the province, and to have economic opportunity here, and that will encourage them to stay here. So when we talk about healthcare, again, it's a holistic approach. You need to make sure that you are working every situation from the bottom up, and making sure that A, there are enough seats, B, that those seats are accessible to financially disadvantaged students, and C, that when they graduate, they are encouraged to stay here in the province, to make their family here, to start their community lives here.
MacKenzie, you say that Clinic 554 should be the model for the province. Does this mean that the NDP advocates more of a private healthcare system as opposed to public, or a hybrid?
No, absolutely not. Clinic 554 is not a private clinic. It is a family doctor's office. And when you look at family doctors' clinics across this province, they technically are privately owned small businesses. That's how our doctor system is set up, but they are funded by the province. This is the one aspect of the economy where I am okay giving funds to what is technically a private business, public funds to a private business. It is a family doctor's office. All of our family doctors are basically set up the same way. Doctors are small business owners, but they provide a public service. So I would ideally like to see a socialized form of medicine where the rent and everything is paid, everything from all aspects of healthcare is provided by the government. But in this instance, no, Clinic 554 is not a private clinic. It is a family doctor's office that provides specific LGBTQ+ and reproductive health that I think more of our family doctors should be providing. So when I talk about making it the model, I talk about making that family doctor's office the model for clinics across the province, and making sure that more family doctors are practicing LGBTQ+ healthcare and practicing reproductive healthcare.
What is the NDP position on business taxes? Do you see big and small businesses being treated differently under the tax system?
Absolutely, they should be. Our small businesses, our local businesses, are businesses that are creating jobs. They're businesses that are stimulating the economy the most. And it's no different than a person. When a person's making $30,000 a year, their tax burden should not be as much as somebody who's earning, $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 a year. Same with corporations. A corporation that's making a profit of $100,000 a year should not be treated the same as a corporation that's making a profit of $1 billion a year. Those are very, very different things. And the big thing I point to is that those small businesses, they're creating the most jobs. They're creating the most economic stimulus. They're putting the most money back into their local communities. These large multinational billion-dollar corporations are not. So when we talk about business taxes, they need to be treated the same way as the personal taxes. They need to be weighted by income. So when you talk about a business making, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 in profit a year, when you talk about a business that's making $900 or $950 million or $1 billion a year, those are two very different things. So when we talk about business taxes, they need to be talked about in the same way as personal taxes. They need to be weighted based on income. Small businesses and large corporations are not the same. They should not be treated the same. And the small businesses are also people who are taking care of their employees at a far higher rate. Working for a small business, I can tell you that making sure that we have a living wage is something that small business owners are very hooked into. It's something that they've had to deal with. Whereas I find the larger corporation you work for, chances are the more fight you have to give to get the benefits you deserve through creation of that profit for the corporation.
How will the NDP address issues like access to mental health, addictions, and homelessness? And how will you engage nonprofit sector to address these issues?
Yeah, so again, it's about creating economic development from the bottom up. Our nonprofit sector, our local businesses, those are the kinds of organizations that are really in tune with their community. They're the ones that are really focused on their community and making their community better. So when we talk about Medicare expansion, which is something the NDP is very passionate about. When we talk about ending homelessness, again, something NDP is very passionate about. We really need to focus on making sure that these systems are set up through nonprofits, making sure they're set up through small businesses in our community, and making sure that people have access to them. So when we talk about Medicare expansion, I'll start with that one. You know, dental care, eye care, and pharmaceutical care and mental health care. I talked a lot today about a holistic approach. When you talk about a holistic approach, it has to include all aspects of health. Physical health is something that, you know, the NDP is the party of healthcare. It's something that we started, something that we are very proud to hang our hat on. But when we're in the 21st century now, we're in the year 2020, and science has evolved, the recognition of different illnesses has evolved, and we do need a robust mental health care plan, and we need it that is accessible. We need it so that you can access it through your Medicare card, and we need it so that it is cost effective, and that is done through accessing it through your Medicare card. When we talk about homelessness, we really need to talk about making sure that nonprofits and making sure that small, local, community-based organizations are able to access the funds needed to provide for their homeless population in their geographic area. But we also need to make sure that the province is investing, that the provincial government is investing in services, in resources for the homeless population, making sure that they have access to needle exchange, making sure that they have access to drug and mental health treatment, not only at a hospital setting or at a public clinic setting, but making sure that we are investing in homeless shelters so that they can provide those services at that level, making sure that people feel as comfortable as possible to come forward, making sure people feel as comfortable as possible to access those services is something that the NDP is going to put forward, something the NDP is going to fight for, in making sure that everyone in this province has access to mental health care and a solid roof over their head, and as well addiction services I usually lump in with mental health care. But there is another aspect to that, which is physical health of the person who is suffering. So we need to make sure that, again, it's a holistic approach, that everyone has access to these services that we're creating, because it doesn't make any sense to create services that half of the population can't access due to cost.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we have here today, Krista and John. If there are any questions from the floor, perhaps you would like to send them in. But other than that, thank you so much for answering all of our questions, MacKenzie. And I will turn it over to our next speaker, who's going to close, I believe.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Thomason, for taking part in our Political Leaders series and for participating in our question and answer period. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Susie Campos, and I'm the CEO with 3+ Economic Development Corporation in Moncton. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speaker again, and as well as offer a special thank you to all of our guests for attending today's Political Leaders series session. The Atlantic Chamber of Commerce, the 3 presenting chambers, Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, as well as the 3 presenting economic development agencies, Economic Development Greater St. John, Ignite Fredericton, and 3+ Economic Development Corporation. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind everyone to attend our last Political Leader Series session today at 9:30 with Finance Leader, Chris Austin. And also don't forget to vote and have a great day today.